The evening of February 28, 2012, the Storm Prediction Center issued their final outlook for the day, placing a portion of the central United States under a slight risk of severe thunderstorms. Although a few weak tornadoes had already touched down earlier that day in the Great Plains, a significant severe weather event during the overnight hours was not anticipated. Little did forecasters know that by the next morning, dozens of tornadoes would have touched down across the country, causing numerous injuries and fatalities. Tragically, this tornado outbreak was soon overshadowed by the devastating March 2, 2012 tornado outbreak 2 days later, which was even more widespread and devastating. As a result, this event had become somewhat forgotten, even among much of the meteorological community. In this video, we'll examine this often overlooked disaster, analyzing the conditions leading up to the event as well as the ensuing aftermath. The tornado outbreak occurred due to a large extratropical cyclone that moved across the central U.S. during the 28th and 29th. As it progressed eastwards, numerous thunderstorms and supercells developed along the associated cold front, with the first tornadoes touching down in Nebraska on the evening of the 28th. During the overnight hours, numerous other tornadoes would touch down throughout the Central Plains and Ohio Valley, many of which would be significant. In total, 42 tornadoes touched down over 7 states, including 10 EF0s, 13 EF1s, and 17 EF2 tornadoes. The two strongest, however, were an EF3 in Stoddard County, Missouri, and an EF4 that severely impacted the towns of Harrisburg and Ridgway in southern Illinois. The rest of this video will focus primarily on the Harrisburg tornado, but let's first take a look at the meteorological conditions that led to this disaster, before analyzing the resulting damage that occurred. The environment over the central U.S. at the time was dominated by a large negatively tilted trough, meaning that its axis was oriented southeast and northwest. This kind of upper-level wind pattern is often associated with tornado outbreaks, and February 29th was no exception. In contrast to positively tilted troughs, which are oriented southwest and northeast, negatively tilted troughs tend to lead to more favorable overlap between the areas of strongest wind shear and most moisture, which are two key ingredients for tornado formation. As is typical with winter events, the powerful extratropical cyclone also led to extreme wind shear ahead of the cold front. With over 70 knots of wind shear and over 700 meters squared per second squared of storm relative helicity in the lowest kilometer of the atmosphere, the kinematic environment was primed for tornadoes. The only question was whether there would be enough moisture and energy in the atmosphere to sustain supercells. Let's take a closer look at the temperature and humidity in southern Illinois leading up to the Harrisburg tornado, focusing on the observations at Mount Vernon Airport just northwest of Harrisburg. The evening before, at around 7 p.m. Central Time, the temperature was in the mid-50s with the dew point in the high 30s, which is far too cold and dry for severe weather, much less tornadoes. The airport also reported weak easterly winds at the time. However, let's see what happened throughout the night. As the cold front moved closer to Illinois, notice how the winds gradually turned to be coming out of the southwest into the east. This allowed for the much moister air mass to the southwest to get advected further north all the way into southern Illinois. Just 9 hours later, at 4 a.m. the temperature had increased to 64 degrees and the dew point had risen to the low 60s, just in time for the incoming supercells to take advantage of the newly moistened air mass. Looking at a map of the mid-level convective available potential energy, or CAPE for short, we see that a narrow nose of higher CAPE had nudged into southern Illinois by this time. Although 500 or so joules per kilogram of CAPE isn't an extreme amount, it would prove to be more than sufficient given the incredible wind shear at hand. At this point, the environment had both favorable kinematics and thermodynamics, and the stage was set for a significant tornado event. The sheer number of tornadoes that touched down makes it impossible to go over every one in a single video, but we'll go over the more impactful ones that caused significant impacts to life and property. The first deadly tornado to touch down during the outbreak was an EF2 that tracked directly through Harveyville, Kansas. Sadly, the tornado formed and dissipated so quickly that no tornado warning was ever issued for the town, leaving its residents completely unprepared. 1 man died and 12 others were injured in the town. This would prove to be the start of many deadly and impactful tornadoes throughout the rest of the night and following day. Another EF2 tornado struck a mobile home park south of Buffalo, Missouri, coincidentally also killing 1 and injuring 12 others. As shown in satellite imagery taken afterwards, many of the mobile homes were completely destroyed, despite the tornado only being of EF2 intensity. unfortunately serving as a grim reminder that mobile homes are not adequate shelter in a tornado of any strength. One of the largest population centers to receive impact from this outbreak was the city of Branson, Missouri, a popular tourist destination known for its many theaters and other attractions. An EF2 tornado first touched down in Kimberling City during the overnight hours, causing damage to many homes and marinas in the area. It then moved eastwards and tracked through downtown Branson, causing widespread damage to numerous theaters and hotels before dissipating east of the city. After the dust settled, 47 people had been injured, but miraculously no one was killed by this tornado. One of the strongest tornadoes in this event was an EF3 tornado in Stoddard County, Missouri. Although it passed over relatively unpopulated areas, scattered homes still received the brunt of the powerful twister. Site-built homes had their exterior walls destroyed, and one person was killed when the mobile home was tossed 80 yards from its original location. Even this tornado, however, would pale in comparison to the strength of the Harrisburg tornado, which was the only violent tornado of the outbreak. The Harrisburg tornado was actually the last in a series of 5 separate tornadoes, all spawned from the same parent supercell. It touched down near the small town of Carrier Mills at 4:51 a.m., where minor damage to a church and other buildings was observed. As it traversed rural farmland, it eventually entered the southwest side of Harrisburg. Initially, only minor and scattered roof damage occurred to residences. However, as it crossed Main Street, the tornado began to contract and suddenly strengthen. Farm buildings on Main Street were completely leveled, and businesses along Highway 42 were swept away by the narrow vortex. The tornado then became violent, sweeping away a large brick church and destroying a strip mall at EF4 intensity as it continued northeast. Unfortunately, the tornado moved back into a residential area after passing through the small commercial district. Here, several duplexes were wiped clean from their foundations, and numerous other homes suffered anywhere from minor roof damage to complete devastation. In total, 8 fatalities were reported at this location. As the tornado exited town, small subvortices continued to inflict seemingly random patches of significant damage. Ridgeway would be the next and fortunately last populace to get hit by the violent tornado. Minor damage to the north side of town occurred, but by far the worst damage occurred to St. Joseph's Catholic Church. The historical brick church, built in 1894, was almost entirely leveled by the intense winds. All that remained of the main auditorium was the entrance tower and the altar, serving as a reminder of the impressive building that once stood there. Although 13 people were injured in Ridgeway, there were thankfully no fatalities. After causing scattered tree damage, the tornado finally lifted northeast of town, marking the end of its 26-mile-long path of destruction. The damage that this tornado did in Harrisburg warrants further examination. It is very unusual for a tornado to intensify that suddenly, and it is especially unfortunate that it happened in such a populated area. What appears to have happened is that the tornado's vortex contracted significantly as it was crossing Main Street. Using aerial photos and high-resolution satellite data taken soon after the disaster, I have attempted to assign ratings to all the damage in this part of Harrisburg using the EF scale. You can see that the area of EF4 damage occurs in an extremely narrow corridor, with neighboring buildings being almost undamaged by the tornado. This suggests that the tornado intensified by contracting its wind field, much as a figure skater starts spinning faster as he pulls her arms in due to conservation of angular momentum. Other intense tornadoes, such as the 2007 Eli, Manitoba, and 2023 Matador tornado, have also exhibited this behavior. The National Weather Service rated this tornado as an 180 mph EF4. Although some NWS damage surveys leave something to be desired, especially with upper echelon tornadoes, I find myself agreeing with their estimate in this case. The worst areas of damage are to the Christ Lutheran Church, the strip mall, and the duplexes on Brady Street, which is where the tornado was at its peak intensity. The church was completely destroyed, with no walls standing. However, it's important to remember that churches are usually weaker than one might expect, since most of the building is a large auditorium that lacks interior walls to provide additional support. In addition, the debris mostly remained on the foundation, whereas in a high-end EF4 or EF5, one would expect the foundation to have been swept cleanly. Thus a low-end EF4 rating seems appropriate. A similar story goes for the strip mall. Although the building was destroyed beyond repair, most of the debris remained on the foundation, and there were still recognizable parts of the structure that remained intact, such as the signage for the Hibbett sports store that formerly stood there. Some of the steel support beams remained standing even as the rest of the building collapsed around it, suggesting a possible weakness in the construction as well. Officially, this damage was rated 180 miles per hour, but this could be on the generous side. Finally, let's look at the duplexes just to the east that experienced the full brunt of the tornado. Unlike the church and strip mall, the foundations of these buildings were completely swept clean of debris. At first glance, one might be tempted to assign an EF5 rating to these homes. However, it's important to keep in mind that unless the house is well built, an EF4 tornado is entirely capable of sweeping a house away. In this case, these duplexes were built on cinder block foundations, also known as CMU foundations. Cinder blocks make for weak foundations compared to poured concrete foundations, since unless the cinder blocks were reinforced with rebar, and these do not appear to be, they create a huge weak point in the structure. As a result, it is likely it would not take more than a low-end EF4 tornado to cause this kind of damage. The lack of significant ground scouring or other contextual damage suggests that a low-end EF4 intensity is appropriate as well. The Harrisburg tornado was not the last tornado in this outbreak, but fortunately no others would come close to its intensity. The last significant tornado to touch down was an EF2 that destroyed homes near Linney, Tennessee, where 2 fatalities occurred, one in a brick home that was almost entirely leveled, and the other in a double-wide mobile home where debris was strewn for hundreds of yards. Although an EF2 rating for a leveled home might seem too low, the NWS did note that the home was poorly anchored. Even taking that into account, however, an EF3 rating feels much more appropriate. After the final storms dissipated, a total of 15 people had died, with hundreds more injured. Although the impacts were severe, there are many stories of recovery in the aftermath. In Harrisburg, a new shopping center was built on the site of the old strip mall, and all the damaged duplexes on Brady Street were rebuilt. Further east in Ridgeway, a new church was constructed on the site of the destroyed St. Joseph's Catholic Church. The new building featured sturdy braced steel framing to survive any future tornadoes, and a former altar was incorporated into the new church along with the original bells that were salvaged from the old tower. Today, the new St. Kateri Tekakwisa Church stands tall over the town of Ridgeway, serving as a reminder that recovery is possible even amidst the worst natural disasters.